and good afternoon from where I am, and good whatever time of day it is from wherever you are. Welcome to our weekly webinar. Lovely to be back. Another lovely day in Pittsburgh. Mild, slight breeze, warm but pleasant. It's a kind of summer day you like. I suppose the ones with the howling gales and the torrential rain. There's James. James is the first one up this week. Well done. Congratulations. You win. There's no prize, but well done. There's Grace in Dublin. Bright and breezy evening in Dublin. How lovely for you. I was actually on the radio in Dublin today. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Interesting topic. Hello, Dennis in Greensburg. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing happening in Europe, or at least in France, which intrigued me, and I read about it in the paper, and then got a phone call from Dublin to talk about it. But anyway, today, Mysterious 7, how we tell stories, and today's adventure will be Rags to Riches, which we will come to in a few minutes. I'm a little late, but then again, so are many others, quite frequently, but I don't admonish them. I understand. There it is, part 3, Rags to Riches. As usual, our thank you to the Allegheny Foundation for their remarkably generous sponsorship of these webinars. Has helped us enormously, saved us a lot of money, and we're very grateful to them. There you are again. If you'd like to make a donation, which we would most appreciate, especially in this, what is going to be our 25th anniversary season, we would like whatever you can consider donating, and you can find it on the website, www.picttheatre.org, and note that there are 2 T's. And also, would love it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and that you can look at all the old webinars if you want, and it gives you lots of information. And there's a thing I do want to say about the subscribing. Please ask your friends to subscribe. At the moment, we've got a very nice list of subscribers, but we haven't yet hit 1,000. We're a small thing, and I don't expect hundreds of thousands of people. It's not like, doing strange podcasts. But if we hit 1,000 subscribers, it means we get free, captioning, closed captioning, which means that you could watch the webinar without actually having to listen to me. You can actually see the words come up. So please do subscribe if you haven't already. Do invite your friends to subscribe. They may be interested in what we have to say. They may not be. But at least if they subscribe, they have a chance. So, and if everybody who is a subscriber asked 1 or 2 friends, join us, make a subscription, we'll have closed captioning before you even know it. And it'll be so wonderful. It'll improve your life. You know it makes sense. So please consider that. How are we doing? We give it another minute or so for the latecomers and the late parkers. Hello, David. There you are in breezy South Warwickshire in the UK. But a lovely part of the country. A beautiful part of England. Hello, Robert from Shadyside. Yes, the Merchant of Venice series. We actually got some very good comments about those 4 programs. And it does seem long to do a webinar topic over 4 continuing programs. But I think when we're dealing with the Shakespeare, it's worth spending the time to do that. And people do seem to enjoy the Shakespeare discussions. We noted that one of the most popular on the for people looking back at earlier webinars was the one we did on Julius Caesar. That gets has been getting a huge viewership. I will do more about Julius Caesar in the future. I mean, it's it's one of my favorites. And we basically just talked about the politics of the 2 funeral orations. But there's so much more to that play that is really quite remarkable. It is a play about politics. It's a play about manipulation, maneuverings, plottings, and planning. So I want to come back to Julius Caesar at a later point. And I also want to invite you, if there are any particular topics on theatre that you don't think we've covered, or that you think we might not think about, do let us know. Send me an email, and whatever the idea may be, we'll try to get round to it. We're doing 1 a week, so there are plenty of weeks left in the rest of my life. So we'll keep talking as long as you keep listening, and you can help us to come up with new ideas. Okay, it's now 5 past, and so we're going to begin. So today's topic is rags to riches, or what we might call the unlikely dream. But before I come to that, I wanted to say a word about, as I said, I did a radio interview with a station in Dublin earlier today, and it's on this thing. The French, who are, for everything you can say about the French, have a remarkable attitude towards culture and have had a remarkable attitude towards cultural education, cultural availability ever since the end of the Second World War, and indeed before that, but particularly since then. And they've now come up with a new concept, which, as far as I can understand it, gives every child at school going age €300, and there's an app that you can put on your phone. And that €300, which is a credit, can be spent experiencing cultural activities, be it whatever, literature, art, music, theatre, whatever. And it's a way they're planning to encourage young people to engage with the arts. And so I got a call asking, myself and my friend Willie White, the director of the Dublin Theatre Festival, were being interviewed about this. And what we both agreed was anything, any way that we can get young people to experience, to encounter the arts is a great thing. My only caveat was that I think it's a little bit of lip service. I always advocate on the principle, you can bring a person, and by that I also mean a child, you can bring a person to culture, but you can't make it enjoy the art. So I never believe in force feeding. And I think that the better solution myself is always education. And the one thing that is true in Europe, it's true in the United Kingdom, it's true in Ireland, and it is certainly true in America, is that we spend far, far too little time educating our young people in the arts. That art is as much part of, or should be as much part of the education system as the principle of science and technology and engineering and mechanics and all of that. That art should be in there as well, because art, as we try to demonstrate with these webinars in terms of drama, is the story of who we are. And only by studying art and by experiencing art and coming to an awareness of what art is saying to us, do we get a real, true impression of the value of humanity. And the value of humanity is a lot more than dollars in the bank and tall buildings and rockets taking billionaires up into space. So that was what that discussion was about. I'd love to know your opinions on that, as to whether the funding, even at that relatively small level of €300, which is what, about about $340, is a worthwhile use of money, or should we be spending more, and should we be increasing the quality and quantity of arts education in school level up to pre-college? Anyway, your opinions, I'd love to hear them. Back to today's point, which is rags to riches. In a funny way, that sort of matches up. Okay, rags to riches, what does that mean? Well, it's one of the basic plots. And it's one of the more intriguing basic plots, because I think it's probably the basic plot that we come to be aware of at our youngest age. It's the first true plot line that we experience as children. And it plays, I called it the unlikely dream, because it is to a large extent based on that unlikely dream that we all have. And if you want the fundamental unlikely dream of the rags to riches, it's called the lottery. All of us who do buy, and even I confess to buying a ticket sometimes when the prize is absolutely outrageous, knowing full well I'm not going to win anything. But it is that rags to riches dream that it just might come true because somebody's got to win. Have you ever met anybody who's won it? I haven't. But anyway, rags to riches is fundamental to our childhood and consequently fundamental to the rest of our lives. And writers from the beginning of writing have used this fundamental storyline or plotline to entertain and to teach and to do to try to understand the way we are. Riches. Well, we could all use a little more money. That is an absolute universal truth. And have you noticed, even billionaires are always looking to make more. Generally speaking, as a sort of rough rule of thumb, the most miserly people on the planet tend to be the wealthiest. They tend to want more. It's a bit like anything else. Any of your secret desires, such as, pumpkin latte or mint chocolate ice cream, once you've had some, you want more. We are never sated. We are never satisfied. There's always that desire for something more. And the need for more, it's not simply a need for more money or a need for more anything. What it actually is a fear of having less. That's where miserliness comes from. You get wealth, you want to accrue it, you want to keep it, you don't want to spend it. You want to make sure you got it. Because the thing that frightens most of us in this world is poverty, to be without. And especially as we get older, our need to feel safe, to feel secure, is bound up very often with our need to accrue wealth. That's been true since, I suppose, the very earliest of times. I put in my notes, I said, true, it's been with us since the earliest cave dweller first moved out of his or her parents' cave and tried to live independently. That we may think that's, the empty nest principle is a modern thing. That's been going on for 100,000 years. And once we decide to be on our own, to go out to find this independence, we dream of riches. I'll come to the word riches in a second. But that's our dream, that on our own, out there in the world, we can survive and we can accrue, that we can go from where we are to a better place or a better status or a better position or a better home or a better job or whatever. We all see that the graph of that rags to riches motion. It's a human instinct, and it's best described to us as stories. Now, in this particular plot line, in this particular process, in this particular human activity or realm of human existence, riches does not always mean money. And in fact, in the vast quantities of literature and drama, money is very often a means rather than an end. We can accrue money. We can go from rags to riches, quite literally, of having nothing to having a bank account with $40 million, euros, or whatever in it. That's rags to riches. But in life, and therefore in art, which is a representation of life, riches can mean so much more, and that journey can mean so much more. So if riches come in many forms, what are those forms? They are forms that offer us certain things, such as security, beauty, a kind of grace, that we go from being graceless to graceful. And again, using those words very particularly and very precisely. And what is that progress? How does that line of progress occur? I want you to think about the butterfly and its life cycle. So first, you have the poor caterpillar, barely able to move. It has 60 pairs of legs in order to just manage to crawl its way along a leaf, and it is grubbing for food. and grabbing whatever it can, wherever it can. The caterpillar is at the bottom of that heap. Then it goes into a strange metamorphosis, the isolation of the chrysalis, where it is alone, where it and life have become hardened, and where it is, as I say, going through a metamorphosis, which in dramatic or literary terms we would describe, it is changing. It is changing from its original state to a new state. And finally, out emerges the butterfly, graceful, beautiful, and finally complete. And that's another important word in this process of rags to riches, that when one starts on this voyage, one is incomplete. And when one finishes the voyage, one is complete. That everything that you need to be the true you has finally come together. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, we first encounter this plot line at a very young age as children, because we read or we are told stories that will give us the promise, or at least the prospect, of a better world and a better life than the one assigned to us by fate. Things can only get better is the sort of fundamental rule of thumb. And these stories, as I am sure you're well aware, will usually begin with the phrase, once upon a time, and usually end with the phrase, and they lived happily ever after. How many stories do we know like that? It's the fundamental way we teach children their first lessons in the life process. They're entertaining, of course. They're not unique. They are worldwide. I'll come to that again in a moment. But it is this once upon a time to they lived happily ever after, is that pattern and shape that teach children things can get better. You can cause your life to change, the lives of others to change. Fate does not dictate that where you start is where you finish. Now let's take a simple example. We all know the story of the ugly duckling. Now, the ugly duckling goes through a process of change. And this change, this move from rags to riches, is not about gaining financially. Obviously, it's a duck, or it's a duckling, or it's not. In fact, it's actually something else. But it has no need of money. What it has need of is companionship, of recognition, of a sharing in society which it is isolated from. And he does gain beauty in the eyes of his or her, it's never specified, relations. It is through that process of change from rags to riches, from the ugly to grace, it discovers grace within itself and within the society it lives in. The change it goes through gives it that. I'll come back to that. The ultimate fairy tale, I think, the one that is the possibly the most popular ever, is the fairy tale of Cinderella. And the clue is in the title, Cinderella, the girl who lives in the kitchen and has to clean the cinders from the fire and is the poorest of the poor in a family that is her own. But she is the one who suffers. She is at the bottom of the pecking order. She is the one in rags. The poorest and the most unfortunate. And yet, in the story, she's the one who gets the prince. She's the one who lives happily ever after. Now that story, that particular plotline, the Cinderella story, that's existed in one form or another since storytelling began. and in all corners of the world. You'll find versions of it in Africa. You'll find versions of it in all over Europe. China, I think the first version of it was traced to China originally, but the one we know best is the Grimm brothers version of it, which was sanitized by Disney a long time ago, and has been the topic of many a children's theatre production for so many years. The girl, poverty, poor, grinding. There's a ball. She wants to go to the ball. They won't let her go to the ball. Fairy godmother arrives. The intervening aspect of fate. Fate takes a hand. And the fairy godmother comes and says, you shall go to the ball and give me a pumpkin and give me 4 rats. And suddenly there's a wonderful coach and horses, and she's in a beautiful gown, and she goes to the ball and she's wearing glass slippers, which must have been phenomenally uncomfortable. And but she's got to be home by midnight. And just as midnight is striking, she leaves the ball, loses a slipper, gets home, and she's back to having a pumpkin, rats, and rags. But the prince has fallen in love with her. And he knows that whoever fits that glass slipper will be the girl of his dreams. And he goes around the kingdom and he tries it on everybody's feet, including the sisters of Cinderella, who try it on. In the Grimm brother tales, they cut off their toes to try to cram their feet into the slipper. It gets gruesome. Kids love that sort of thing. We sanitize it, but kids actually love that. And of course, the slipper fits, and Cinderella and the prince sees her truly for the first time. Not dressed as a princess, but even in rags, he sees that this is beauty and grace and charm and loveliness, and marries her. And they all live happily ever after. Not the sisters, by the way, because in the Grimm brothers version, on the way to the church to get married, the crows come down and peck out the eyes of one sister. And on the way back to the palace from the church, the crows come down and peck out the eyes of the other sister. These tales are truly moral tales in the sense that they also tell us badness does not fail to go unpunished. And the true message within all of these is live better, live generously, live kindly, because if you don't, something nasty will happen to you. But anyway, there's your classic rags to riches. And it is repeated thematically. Now, why am I going on and on and on about this? Why am I, in fact, doing this particular series? Because I want you to consider every time you read a book or see a play, how do these basic plots fit together? What is their relationship to one another, and what is their relationship to me? Is my life represented within these plots? And the truth is, yeah, it is, because we go through all of these experiences ourselves. We may not be Cinderella. We may not be Cinderella. I know I certainly am not. My foot would never fit into that slipper. But the basic principles of these plots, why these plots exist, is because they truly represent life as we live it and as we know it. Let's take another example. There is a young man, poor, a servant, goes off with his master to this great challenge that's been set. And all the knights in the realm have tried and have failed this challenge, which is, of course, to pull a sword out of a stone. And the poor boy, when nobody's looking, goes up and thinks, I wonder, and he puts his hand on it, and out the sword comes. And from that moment on, he's King Arthur. Rags to riches in an instant. It's the same basic principle. Poverty, a challenge, facing the challenge, draw the sword. You are a hero, you are a king, you have made that journey. It's a very simple version of it, but it's the same story. If you look at the 1001 Nights, tales, the Arabian Nights, it's full of those rags to riches, but the best of them all is the story of Aladdin. Aladdin, son of a washerwoman, son poverty, grinding, poor, China, an emperor at one end and poverty at the other end. And he, again, fate intervenes. A mysterious uncle comes and says, help me find a treasure and I'll give you whatever. And so Aladdin goes with him, goes into a cave, has to do a search, finds this magic lamp, hands it to the uncle slams the door shut, he's trapped in there alone, dilemma, finds a ring, polishes that, and a genie appears. I will help you, get me out of here, gets him out of here, help me get the lamp back, gets the lamp back, another genie appears. And through a series of tribulations and trials, he then overcomes all his problems, wins the princess, of course, becomes heir to the throne, and lives happily ever after. Same story. The Ugly Duckling, to come back to that, is actually, in a way, the fundamental theme for one of George Bernard Shaw's most famous plays and most loved plays. And you've seen the play, and if you haven't, you've probably seen the musical. And that, of course, is Pygmalion, or My Fair Lady. And the character of Eliza Doolittle is a perfect example of the Ugly Duckling and Cinderella. But let's use the Ugly Duckling motif. Eliza is a character who, as we know, starts in rags. She's a flower seller in Covent Garden. She is uneducated. She is poor. She is alone. Her mother's dead and her father's a drunk. So she is this perfect caterpillar in that sense, right? Rather nice for a flower seller. She's a caterpillar. And she is literally surviving. And then something happens. She meets a man, or she listens to a man speaking. And also money comes her way. I mean, a lump of money. Somebody takes the contents of their pocket and gives it to her. And she accepts the challenge that fate has given. She will go to this man and say, teach me. And she goes through an enormous amount of anguish, pain, and suffering, and having marbles put in her mouth until she can speak properly, and all sorts of terrible things. And dilemmas, emotional dilemmas. Fear, the challenge of facing a strange world. But she overcomes that challenge. And just like the Ugly Duckling who goes through the dark night of the soul, through the winter, when all the swans disappear and leave him alone, and he's frightened, and he's alone, and he's cold, and he's miserable, and he's hungry, and spring comes, and he looks at his reflection in the pond, and there he is, a swan. So does Eliza Doolittle. She goes from being the Ugly Duckling to being the swan. Her gift, the gift that she gets, the riches that she gets, the rags to riches, the riches that she gets are the riches of education. The magic of education. Just like Aladdin's lamp, education is the magic lamp for Eliza Doolittle, because it gives her grace, it gives her poise, it gives her manners, it gives her language, and it gains her admiration, just as the Ugly Duckling gets from the swans when they actually truly see what the Ugly Duckling really is. And when Higgins and all the other characters see what Eliza Doolittle really is, an intelligent, articulate, thoughtful, and profoundly attractive person, hidden by the rags. When all of those rags are taken away and she is given, through the intercession of education, all these gifts, she becomes beautiful. And of course, being Shaw, she doesn't just gain all of those things, she gains worldly wisdom as well. Because at the end of that play, Higgins is not the prince. In fact, the prince is the idiot, Freddie, which is completely stupid, but what can you do? In that same world, in that same theme, and I hope I'm making the point that this story is the same story, In the world of fiction, rags to riches can be found in an awful lot of Charles Dickens' writings. David Copperfield, case in point. David Copperfield, rejected, his mother dies, his father beats him, sends him off to work almost as a slave in a blacking warehouse in London. And slowly, gradually, through an enormous number, because it's Dickens, an enormous number of subsidiary plot lines, working his way up to becoming successful and gaining, after the death of one wife, the woman who truly loves him, a rags to riches rainbow, you might describe that. Nicholas Nickleby, another example of it. Again, impoverished, ends up not wealthy, but with the world to rights and his place in it to rights. Little Dorrit, classic example. It starts in a debtor's prison. This arc of poverty, possibility, pain and suffering, anguish, to ultimate satisfaction. It's the same pattern. I'll give you another example of it. This one is one that is close to my heart because I adapted the novel for the stage, but we'll talk about it in these terms. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre is one of the most perfect rags to riches stories ever, where the riches are happiness. You have this young, poor girl, an orphan, brought up in the family of her aunt. The family treat her like a servant. They eventually get rid of her, send her away to an appalling school, a dreadful place run by a Mr. Brocklehurst. There, she suffers humiliation. She makes a friend who dies, but she stays there and she sticks it out and eventually moves from being a child student to becoming a young teacher there. And she moves on. She goes into the next stage, which is to get out of that world and to find a new world. She falls eventually for her not particularly handsome prince. She wins him in the end after refusing a bigamous marriage, having taken a long journey, nearly dying. She turns down the offer of another marriage, and on hearing the disembodied voice of her lonely prince call to her, she returns to him and marries him and gains the riches of love and security and the contentment of being with the person you love, and that person loving you. Same is true of Pride and Prejudice, the other most popular novel in the world. I think there are about 6 of them. Elizabeth Bennet is not exactly poor, but she is destined to lose her home. That's all tied up with the old law of entail, where property could only pass down through the male line. Thankfully, we've stopped doing that now. So Elizabeth Bennet and her sisters, unless they find men to marry, will be destitute, thrown out of the house, living on the kindness of strangers, all of that sort of thing. But eventually, Saint Elizabeth eventually falls for a man who she thought to be utterly despicable, but discovers through a journey to be a hero, a true hero. Her prince, if you like. And she wins him and his house and his fortune in most satisfactory, happy ever after way imaginable. But it is that same journey repeated again. I'm giving you these examples because I want you to think, I've read that, I know that, I've seen it. And as you read more and as you examine more scripts or more novels, to seek out these plot lines, and particularly this plot line, and to then say to yourself, I've done that, I've been there. We have all taken our rags to riches journey. And it's not just the miracle of the moment that transforms. Magic, in this sense, and I talk about, such magic as Aladdin's magic lamp, The magic, whatever it may be, will always reveal what's always been there, the inner true beauty or the wit or the wisdom of the character. Because rags to riches does not take you from being one person and turn you into another person. It takes the person you are in the circumstances you are and simply changes those circumstances so that you can flourish, so that you can blossom, so that you can grow. It gives to the intelligent person education. It gives to the poor person enough to allow them to demonstrate who they truly are. Beauty can shine through rags, but it shines a lot brighter in a nice ball gown. It's, again, like you've heard me use this quote before, the best things in life may be free, but have you ever tried to get any of them without money? Well, for money, read The Magic, whatever that magic is. And that magic can be a magic lamp, or it can be a fairy godmother, or whatever. But by that process, we are allowed to move up the same slope that the caterpillar has to climb, from the creature on the leaf through the cold, hard reality of the chrysalis to come out as a beautiful fly. And as I say, in Cinderella, the prince actually sees her beauty through the rags that she wears at home. Once he's put the slipper on her foot, he sees that it's her. He can see that the woman he fell in love with at the ball is the same woman in the beautiful ball gown and looking elegant and wonderful, is the same woman sitting in front of him, dressed in rags and covered in fire ash. It's the same woman. But the opportunity, the rags to riches, gives her the opportunity to be seen for her beauty that is inside, that is true, not that mask of poverty that's been laid on her. Aladdin in the 1001 Nights Tale has all the wit and intelligence to win a princess and run a country without any of the magic, but the magic allows it to open up. It is that part of that journey that allows the person to show themselves as they truly are. We all have that. It happens in all our lives. Something will come along, some opportunity will come along, and you can suddenly show, no, I can do this. No, I am this. I'm capable of this. It's that revelation that takes you from one place to another, from one level to another. Even without the wealth, he was still Aladdin. Even without the riches that the genie creates, the reality is, though, that without the wealth, he wouldn't even have got through the palace gate, let alone met the princess. Have you ever tried to get anything without money? So the wealth, the miracle of the wealth, is a mechanism to reveal the true nature of the person. And in these stories, there's usually a catharsis. It's always important. What we might describe as a torment or a period of suffering that the hero or heroine has to go through. I would describe that as the chrysalis period between caterpillar and butterfly. Jane Eyre, for example, in the story, everything appears to be good, and then it goes wrong. And having found what she believed was true happiness, she has to go. She goes on a journey with no money, no resources, no destination planned, nothing but the clothes she stands up in. She goes, she travels north, it is cold, she has no food, she is literally begging door to door. It is the poverty and isolation that is classic in these storylines. She eventually meets this man. He is a minister, John Rivers, and he and his sisters take her in and nourish her and bring her back to life and allow her to develop her true nature, her true self. She still has to go through problems with him before she gets back to where she should be and where she belongs. But it is that period of catharsis, that period of change, the chrysalis moment. And it is exactly the same as the ugly duckling who was left alone to face the cold winter by himself or herself before the spring came along, and through the catharsis of winter, the change occurred, and there is the beautiful swan. So you can say, and I would say, that true rags to riches stories, and I'm sure, look on your bookshelves, you'll find a dozen without seeking too hard that I haven't mentioned. It is of all the plot lines, probably, as I say, one of the most basic, one of the most fundamental, and one that we learn from childhood. It's there in our lives as children. That's simple, and I'm going to go through it again. The beginning, based in poverty and isolation. And by isolation, I mean not being an accepted member of society, whatever that society may be. Come back to the ugly duckling. The swans don't like him because he's an ugly duckling. To be rejected, to be a reject. That's the rags. Now, it's not simply what you wear. It is the fact that you are a reject within the society in which you exist. And that's the worst thing that you can possibly be. Then, you are, as it were, you receive an invitation from fate or some other invitation to change, to move on and go out into the world. And that invitation can be the fairy godmother, it's the genie in Aladdin's lamp. It is that moment, and it is for Jane Eyre, for instance, the discovery that she could become a governess. Instead of working in the school, she could move on. Jane Eyre actually in the novel uses that phrase, move on, several times. I must move on. It's time for me to move on. And that can only be possible with the invitation to do so, because to move on, you must have a place to move to. So then, having made that choice, having said, I am no longer going to be what I am, fate, the fickle finger of fate, has pointed at me and said, here's an opportunity to get out of this. And you take that opportunity. That is your first step towards independence. You make the choice, I'm going to move on. And so you have this period of initial success, a discovery. I'm just a little worried about my computer because I think it's about to die. Just bear with me a second. I need to plug it in. You've made the choice to move on, and that's better. And so you take the step of moving, the step of motion. And that usually brings a period of initial success because it's different. You've changed. Change has happened. You discover that life can be different, and you're getting a glimpse of what life could be like if fate intervened, if fate allowed it to happen. Jane Eyre, for instance, discovers Rochester, and on discovering him, listening to him, watching him, sharing his house, caring for his ward, sitting, eating meals with him, listening to him talk, she falls in love. And she falls in love not with the handsome prince, but with this gruff, fast approaching middle age, not particularly attractive, not always particularly pleasant man. But she falls in love with the man, not the appearance. And the good thing about it is he falls in love with her. Then you move to the crisis stage. Everything goes wrong. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. He says, marry me. She says yes. They plan the wedding. They're going to the wedding. In the church, at the wedding, if anyone knows of any just cause or impediment, and someone says, I do, he's already married. The shock of that. This is fate taking a cruel twist. Fate that has brought you out of it, has brought you from isolation, from poverty, from rags, to the promise of riches. You've got the smell of it, you've got the taste of it, you feel it's there within your grasp, and suddenly fate takes it away. On the point of marrying her hero, she discovers he's a villain. He has a wife, and of course it's the mad wife up in the attic. And try as he might, he offers her everything to go away, that she can be, they can be together, they can go and live outside the country. But that would be as his mistress, not as his wife. That is not the true riches she wants. She wants the riches of the true bond of a man and a woman together, husband and wife for all time, in trust. So then it's time, to use her phrase again, to move on. And she leaves, she goes. She leaves everything behind her. She leaves in only the clothes she arrived in. She takes nothing with her. And she risks begging, as I said before, begging door to door, all of that. Found by the Rivers family, taken in, nourished, prepared. It's the chrysalis moment where the nourishment is within this rather hard shell of the environment in the Rivers household, because he is deeply religious, because he has an absolute faith, because his sisters will always support him, because he's going to India to teach people who have perfectly good religion of their own, to teach them how to be Christians. And it is, even though it is kind and loving, it is a hard shell of a world. And he wants her to go with him. He wants her to become his wife, not because he loves her, but because he needs a wife to go there, because that is proper. And she feels an obligation to serve, an obligation. It's always there in her life, her obligation to serve others, to help others. So within this hard chrysalis, this hard shell, she feels trapped. But then she's also in this period not only survived, but she has gained an inner strength, an inner wisdom. And she finds herself having to fight with her own internal weaknesses. These weaknesses make her do things that she feels she ought to do rather than the things that she knows for her she should do. And she learns how to cope with that. The inner demon within her is saying, I will go, I will not go on your terms. I will go on my terms. And just as she said to Rochester, I am a free and independent woman, she says exactly the same to St. John Rivers, because she's discovered that that is what she is. Her journey of discovery has shown that she is independent and that she makes her own choices, and they are not to be made for her. And then the fickle finger of fate happens again. She hears a voice. She hears him calling. Now, whether that's a reality or a fiction is irrelevant. What matters is at the moment of great decision, she and fate turn her. They turn her back to where she ought to be. And she goes back and discovers that her prince is there, that his wife is now dead, that he is now blind. But she knows that she has gained the riches she deserved. The riches are being the love of a man who truly loves her, not for what she looks like, not for anything she possesses, but because of her soul, because of who she has, I suppose in that sense, made herself to be through that journey, through the chrysalis period. The butterfly has emerged, and it is the butterfly of a pure, wonderful, independent, articulate, rich woman, rich in all the things that she values and that he values. And there you have it. It's the story of the ugly duckling, but it's called Jane Eyre. It's the story of the butterfly, but it's called Jane Eyre. And I'm using that one as a specific example because, well, some of you may have seen it when we did it either in Dublin or here in Pittsburgh. But it is such an incredibly popular and wonderful story. And it is perfect. It is a perfect example of that pure, wonderful pattern of rags to riches. But what are the rags and what are the riches? So why do we find such satisfaction in these stories. I think because, and this is my opinion, and everything I tell you may be wrong, but I think it's because we recognize them from our childhood, that there is a kind of satisfaction. They are the most optimistic of all the themes that the seven plots can give us. The journey there and back again may not give you a satisfactory journey. And the quest that you may be sent on, or that you may choose to go on, may not be satisfactory in its result. The quest may be for something unpleasant. The quest may fail. The quest may be too much, too difficult, or it may kill you. But the rags to riches, even by the implication of what it is called, has a positive result. It will always have a positive outcome. And as children, we want a happy ending. As children, when we hear a fairy story, we love Once Upon a Time. We love that phrase. George Lucas was no fool when he started Star Wars with Once Upon a Time in a Galaxy Far, Far Away, because we recognize it. And I think just about every cultured society in the world will have an equivalence to Once Upon a Time. But what satisfies us most is always that story concludes, and they lived happily ever after. Not they survived. Not, well, they came together and it was okay. Not, well, he didn't really like her, but he put up with her because he liked the way she cooked broccoli. No, they lived happily ever after. It is the satisfactory, the perfect conclusion to any story, and we want it. We want, just as last week I was saying, we want to be the hero. We want the happy ending. The happy ending gives us that kind of comfort. It is the comfort blanket of storytelling, and it is the comfort blanket of life. We want our ending to be happy. Now, every one of our stories ends constantly. We're always achieving something and think, oh, that's great, it's wonderful. Then another problem comes. But we seek and long for and are deeply happy with that. They all lived happily ever after, for how long ever after may be. A week, a month, a lifetime, eternity, it doesn't matter. We lived happily in it. That, I think, is why that plot line is the most fundamental, the most satisfying, and the most popular. We still love a good fairy tale when you think about it. And that's that for this week. Next week, I'm hoping, I'm still plotting and planning, and I've got to convince myself. But for those of you who follow the activities of PICT, we've recently appointed a new associate producer, and we are seeking out some interesting new, not new necessarily new works, but a new look at the whole question of classic plays. And so I'm hoping next week that she'll join me, because I want to talk about Native American drama in general, but two particular plays in that genre. And so I'm pretty certain that's what we'll be doing next week. But you'll find out all about it on the website, or better still, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. So subscribe away, get your friends. Yes, you're right, Kate. The variations of Cinderella in movies is amazing. But that's why I say, of all the fairy stories around, that is still the most popular. It's the most wonderful, it's the most magical, it's the most satisfying. Even if the ugly duckling is the most fundamental, that notion of Cinderella is the most universal and the one that makes us happy. Educating Rita, yes, David, you're right. Both characters are going rags to riches. Yes, because he is going from the rags of alcohol abuse to the riches of finding a true worth for himself. But she is going on that true journey of ignorance to knowledge, the riches that education gives, the prize that it gives. And Rita she is a Cinderella. She is also an Eliza Doolittle. and she is also an ugly duckling. She's got all of those aspects within her. So yeah, I completely agree. I think Educating Rita is a perfect example. Thank you very much, Philomena. That's very kind of you to say that. I appreciate that a great deal. As I say, if you have any further thoughts yourselves, do let us know. If there's any topics you want me to talk about, let us know. Thank you again to the Allegheny Foundation. But the one thing I'm going to keep banging on about until it drives you insane, make a donation, and please, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get your friends to subscribe. They don't even have to watch the webinars. Just get them to subscribe, because with 1,000 names on that list, we get, amongst other things, free closed captioning, which means, as I say, you can actually read what I'm saying without actually having to listen to me, which might be a blessing. You never know. In the meantime, I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful week. I hope the weather stays fine. I hope you stay healthy. Don't take risks. When in doubt, wear a mask. Love you all. Bye now.